Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning into our webinar today. We are going to cover a topic that is something I find really fascinating as a study of business models and business in general. We're going to be talking about how to scale your revenue, something I think everybody who runs a business is very interested in. I appreciate everyone joining today, and I'd like to welcome Adam Lamb and Hugh Marr of the Coach Hub. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for
Pleasure,
inviting
Hugh.
us.
Nice to see you.
Adam and Hugh are longtime coaches, business people joining us over from Europe. I'm in Colorado. The great power of Zoom and our ability to communicate is amazing. And you guys are out doing a lot of coach education out there. And I wanted to be able to, bring you together and talk more about things that I see coaches asking me about quite regularly, which is, how do I scale my revenue? I want to make more money. Who doesn't? And we're going to talk today about how moving away from the standard 1 hour lesson and give you tips and tricks, ideas, thoughts on how to do that. The Coach Hub is an amazing resource supporting coaches all over the world, talking not only about coaching and business, but we're gonna dive into a number of things today, all along this topic. So I appreciate having you guys here to talk boots on the ground, real world stuff. And also, without further ado, anybody who's tuned in, we've got quite a few folks. Feel free to use the Q&A section on the Zoom app. That's being monitored by members of our staff at Onform here. And if they can't answer things, or I'll handle them throughout the webinar, and we'll aim for about 30-45 minutes today. So feel free to bring your Q&A in at any time, and I'll take moments throughout the meeting to answer those. All right, let's just kind of dive in here. What I hope to accomplish today is to really set people's minds and give them some ideas on thinking a little bit differently in terms of how they run their business. A coaching business is very similar to this software business that we run here at Onform. The whole goal is to, how do you get people to subscribe, or how do you get people to pay you, and how do you keep people from churning out? And the traditional coaching model is really designed for incredibly high churn. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how to manage and think of frameworks a little bit different than that. And essentially, I think there's two key components. One is the deliberate practice loop, which we'll talk about more, giving people a longer term goal, understanding how their commitment can change with that goal. And then the concept of getting paid for your knowledge, not just getting paid for your time. That's something that's kind of I've observed over the years. I've been working with coaches for 26 years across multiple different sports, and different sports and their coaches have different ways of thinking about how revenue creation is done. And in golf, it's still very much tied to getting paid for your time. Signing up for an hour lesson, you stand there for an hour and you tell them stuff, and you're not really in control of your time there. And there's very little ways to scale. Adam, Hugh, let's hear from you a little bit. Can you give us a little bit of your backgrounds? Because we happen to have such incredible knowledge wrapped up in your brains. Let's hear a little bit from you, Adam. Why don't you give us a little background on yourself?
Thank you. Yeah. So as you said, coaching for over 25 years, just from a background more in business. I studied business at school. Was fortunate to be in a family that were very business orientated, and it kind of struck me very early in my coaching career of just how little information there was available, especially during my apprenticeship, on sort of how to run a successful coaching business. And I just felt that everybody around me behaved in this sort of traditional manner, and that when you looked at other businesses, it came clear that the coaching business of golf seems to be stuck in the Middle Ages on how we earn our money and what we need to do to earn it. So I sort of delve more into, looking at successful businesses and other sports, on how they run successful coaching businesses. And then I ended up, writing, sort of putting the ideas in practice first into my own coaching business. I was fortunate to be very successful. And then of course, I wanted to share that with other coaches, to help coaches understand that, you don't need to start 8 o'clock in the morning and smash 10 lessons out a day, 7 days a week, and then, have to do it all again the following season.
Excellent. Yeah. It's great to hear from somebody who's been there, done it, and been able to change the way you have actually engaged with your students and customers. So we'll hear more about that in a little bit. Hugh, give us a quick background on you as well. You've been a contributor here on our webinars. One of the absolutely most popular ones we did on 3D a few weeks ago. I've heard rave reviews of that. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I for my sins, I spent better part of 20 years coaching on tour. I've coached now for 35 years, give or take. Probably about 5 years ago, a bit of a COVID baby was, and a epiphany for me was walking away from working on tour, DP Tour, DP World Tour, PGA Tour, to branch out into coach education and coach more than education, but mentoring and support. Because one of my issues with the industry is that a lot of the time golf coaches are spending their time in isolation. They don't have a support network. They don't have mentors. And unfortunately, the existing qualifications for golf coaches don't include anything relating to business support, financial management, understanding how to market, use social media. And Adam and I got together about 5 years ago and decided that, you know what, we were both complaining about the same things, and neither of us are the type of people that are going to just continue to complain without taking action. So we got off our fat asses and decided that, you know what, there's a real opportunity to help the most important people in the game of golf, the people that coach the game. There's a real opportunity here to give them the mentoring and the support they need so that they can not just run successful businesses, but have a better quality of life, understand what it takes to run a successful business, while also getting better at coaching. And that's basically ended up with us being here now in front of you.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks for joining. And I love that you've become a coach of coaches, because I think in my observation it's similar. And Adam had made the comment. 95% of the content out there in the world is all about how to make you a better coach. And I think that's certainly credible and useful. And we love to dive into the details and minutia of swing analysis and technology and how to coach better. But there's so little about the business of coaching. And the reality is every golf coach out there is pretty much running their own business. And that's the part that I find fascinating. I've been in the golf industry now for 6 years. Before that, I was 20 years in the endurance coaching industry. And to my surprise, or maybe not to my surprise, the sport of endurance compared with golf are absolutely polar opposites. And here's what I mean by that. In endurance sports, triathlon, cycling, etc., had the fortune of working with thousands of coaches across every level, across all over the world. Most of the time, they never meet their clients, and every single time, they're charging basically on a monthly basis and doing little micro bits of programming for those coaches. And in the golf world, it's still very much like physical therapy or going to the gym. You're basically selling your time, and people show up for an hour, and you stand there and talk with people, and there's nothing wrong with that. But where it does break down is over time, it becomes difficult to scale. And the reality is the world works like that, right? Lawyers, doctors, etc. You book some time, you pay some money, and you get some knowledge back that hopefully helps you. but it's very linear, right? So this slide, as I'm talking about, and I'm pointing out things just to start bringing some thoughts to people's minds. Coaching is quite linear. If you want more money, you need another client, and another client means another hour, and guess what? You bump into a limit. And so the only way to really grow your revenue is to start charging more, right? There's only so many hours in the day. And unlike lawyers and doctors, you typically can't charge $1,000 an hour. It'd be nice if you could, but it's just not quite realistic for the majority of folks. So coaching in general in golf has become quite linear. But what's the goal? How can you scale, right? You know all this amazing stuff. You are the influencer in your community when it comes to golf, getting in better. So how can you leverage your knowledge in more ways than simply having more customers stand there, because there's only so much time in the day. So with that as the background, of course, what coaches want is to get paid for their knowledge, not just their time. That's how I look at it. You've got all this fascinating, amazing information in there. You can help so many people, but how can you get that knowledge out to people without just having, more time? And, every student that comes to you is looking for really just one thing. They want to get better. And the industry that I've observed, which again, I don't think there's anything wrong because there's an exchange of value, is usually set up to this quick fix. I'm slicing it, I'm hooking it, I can't get the ball in the air. I'd be curious to hear from you guys, what the typical client that comes in for coaching, they're obviously looking to get better. How do you help them, think about or assess that initial need that they have when they come to you for a lesson? Adam, I'd love to hear kind of how you engage your students initially.
Yeah, I think there's obviously a difference depending on sort of the level of golfer you coach. Like I'm quite sure, with Hugh's expertise, the majority of golfers are probably better than sort of your club golfer. Not only, but so obviously every golfer comes to you, they want some sort of clarity, whether it be their technique or whether they're not improving with their handicap. And for me, really, it's about the questioning to begin with, sort of like you can tell pretty quickly whether it's somebody who does just want a quick fix and you literally, they're shanking it and they got a tournament at the weekend and they only come to you when they really have a problem. I would say that's the few. But I would say most golfers come with the hope of improving long term. And then for me, it's about sort of the information, gathering as much information as possible, using potentially statistics, sending them away with tasks of getting more and more information about where, really where are the weaknesses. Because often you have somebody saying, I played terrible at the weekend and I had, 105 shots. Because I just hit it badly. But when you dig a little bit deeper, you understand that, they've stayed in every single bunker with 2 shots and had 3 putts on most greens. So definitely just trying to first find out, as much information as possible, everything I need to know to be able to then sort of say, well, how can we build a structure? How can we create clarity around your golf game? What do you need to improve in every area of your game to reach, your objectives? And what are those objectives? And how often can you practice? How much time are you willing to invest? And then once you have that full picture, you can start to, create then the product that they require.
And on that note, I would like to put out there a little framework, which is really the deliberate practice loop. This is deliberate practice is a term coined by a researcher from Florida State, Anders Ericsson. I've studied his teachings for a long, long time. And while there are, of course, lots of educational frameworks out there, as a generic or general way to think about stuff, I'd like to put forth this idea of deliberate practice and getting people to think about this. And so what really is this deliberate practice loop? I would say with a coach, with expert guidance, and that is the key here, setting a goal, getting a plan, doing focused practice, and receiving immediate feedback with that coach's supervision. That is the framework that I think should be applied or could be applied to so many opportunities of student improvement. You know, whether they think they're coming in for a lesson on fixing their slice, there is this exact same deliberate practice loop. And there's really a couple of them. There's a macro practice loop, meaning, hey, what's your actual big goal, right? You want to fix your slice, but you know, why? What's the real goal here? Well, I'd love to be a 5 handicap. Maybe you're an 8 or a 10 now, and I want to be a 5 handicap. So setting a goal that's date driven. All right, well, I'd like to be a 5 handicap by a certain given date. Let's say October 1st. Now we've set the plan in motion for getting their mindset out of just fixing their slice to achieving a bigger goal. Okay. What's the plan to do that? Well, I'm going to come in for a lesson once a week. I'm going to have, I'd like you to monitor, you know, my actual playing rounds. That's where you can work with the coach, or the coach can work with the student to develop an actual longer term plan. They're going to describe what that practice session is going to look like, requirements, like you were saying, what level of effort they'll have to go through. And the coach is there to provide immediate feedback. That's where the video review, the asynchronous coaching, remote or in person, comes in. This can also be applied to an individual lesson, right? Like, what's the goal? Well, I'd like to hit my 7-iron in the air. All right. Here's the coach is going to come in and start helping with technique to make that happen. The coach is going to leave the person with a practice plan. And again, the feedback part, whether that happens in person or remote, is really the key piece. So what we're doing here, this framework, the entire goal is intended to lower churn of your students. Like the student that comes in for the fix, who has no expectation to come back, churns immediately. Just like in our software business, our goal is to get, you know, people, show them value, that they subscribe, and then keep them subscribed by showing them continuous value, and so they don't churn out. And I think coaching is the same thing. You have to be able to continue to show your value to the student in the effort and in the goal of achieving that bigger, longer term goal. How often are you seeing coaches think about coaching like this, Hugh, versus the quick fix mindset?
Well, there's a lot to pick through here. I think I don't think that coaches necessarily ever embark on a golf lesson thinking this is just going to be a one-off. Now, I know that's a general statement, but that may happen in private clubs where, you know, you've got this one guy who just wants a golf lesson because he's struggling. But I think that the expectation from coaches is that that they may well come back, and the success of that first lesson is largely going to dictate whether they come back. Yes, of course, there'll be other issues or other areas to explore. Like, is there a good fit? Is there a personal connection there? Do you relate as a human being? Do you relate from a golf perspective? But by and large, I don't see many coaches who just are accepting that person's going to be a one-off. There are an awful lot of factors involved in negating the churn and getting people from a one-off client to a regular client, and an awful lot of those principles, I think, exist outside of the golf coaching realm per se. It's just about looking after people well. I have real issue with the term quick tip, because I don't necessarily see it being this kind of toxic approach to coaching that the industry by and large does. That when you're talking about generating and retaining business, there is one really simple way to give you your best chance. And that is to coach well. That is to give people good golf lessons. The single best business model is to make people better. And I mean, I often say, slightly flippantly, but I often say that tour coaching was effectively quick tip coaching around a plan. I think for a lot of golfers, a plan per se could be quite intimidating. And certainly my experiences with building a plan is that in a sport where you have so many variables, where there's so few constants other than your golf equipment might be a constant, and the fact there's going to be 18 holes, there's very few constants outside of that. So building a plan that's going to be able to deal with all of this infinite amount of variables that we're dealing with every time we play or practice is very difficult. So if we were to replace the term quick tip with right tip and ensure that every student, when they walk in, they've got the information by the time they leave, whether that's 1 hour's time, 2 hours' time, regardless. If you have made them better in that time and made an effort to rebook them, then you're going to do okay. That a lot of the time when you're talking to collegiate players, or when you're talking to high-level amateur golfers and professionals, and they're bitching about X, Y, and Z, the reality is that good golf fixes everything. Right? You play well, you get into the next tournament. You play well, you get into the majors, you win money. It's all about playing well. The rest is noise. I think it's exactly the same with coaching. That if you give great golf lessons and your students get better, you have built a successful business, and you have a business plan or a business model that is completely timeless. People will come back. Now, that's not to say that there are other simple business practices that you can build around the outside of that, which makes the instance of them coming back more likely. One of my great mentors and friends, Dennis Pugh, so I'm going to give you the two most important elements of every golf lesson from a coach's perspective. Number one, don't let them leave without rebooking, and number two, get paid. Now, in any other industry, that statement would be nonsensical, but you would not believe the amount of coaches that are afraid to get paid, afraid to ask for money, who think that it's pushy to ask them to rebook. I mean, two of the most simple business practices that exist in every other service industry, for some reason, it's viewed as tasteless to ask for money for your services and to see if you can get them rebooked.
Yeah.
So now if you've got this model of, well, I'm giving great golf lessons, my students are getting better, I rebook them, I make sure I get paid every time, I'm not afraid to charge what I'm worth. Again, another massive issue in the industry. Oh, I can't put my lesson fees up by $5 an hour. When was the last time you put your lesson fees up? About 10 years ago. Again, that's cloud cuckoo land. That's living in an entirely distant reality. But as soon as you start to identify a sort of handful of core skills that become part of your operating procedure on a day-to-day basis, assuming you're giving great golf lessons, assuming that you're a good guy or a good girl to spend time with, assuming they get a great experience, assuming that they get looked after like human beings, assuming that everything is that we're treating them like we would in a luxury environment, then you're already well on your way to filling your diary.
Yeah.
Particularly for coaches who are based at private facilities with 500-600 members, you get a 500 member database. How can you not make a living from that?
I think good coaching is the foundation of all this. Let's talk a little bit more about the business model of it. We've had a question about that, right? Like maybe it's a vernacular thing. A person asked online, what's the distinction between teaching and coaching, and the applicability of kind of what we're talking here, the business model, right? What's the business model for true coaching based on relationships and not just fixes, which is a perfect setup, I think, for this slide.
You might need to share your screen, Gear.
Can you not see my screen?
No, it's just as well you don't work in technology, isn't it?
I can see it.
Well, now, are you
I
sure?
can see it. I've got it now.
Yeah. I'm never one to claim that I actually know anything about technology. My
Me
wife
neither.
will attest that even though I'm apparently running a technology company and have always been dealing with computers for my life, I'm not very good at it. But hopefully people are seeing the screen here. Well, let's talk more about the meat of what we really came here to talk about, or something I'd like to kind of dive into more, which is all around the business model. I believe the business model of true coaching, to that question specifically, is a long-term engaged relationship. And the only way you have a long-term engaged relationship, of course you have to be a good coach. Of course you have to help people get better. But the reality is, I think everybody's doing that, or everybody's seeking to do that, whether they're helping a 30 handicap or a +2, that's the table stakes, right? And coaches are always out improving their education, trying to learn more, the latest techniques, the latest technology, etc. Let's talk more about the actual business model of a long-term relationship. And what I'd like to set the stage with and get more of your comment here is I'd like people to think about the types of things that coaches do and how each one of those scale. And at the very top, if you look at my little scale pyramid, it took me a long time to draw that, so I know it looks impressive. But at the tip of that pyramid is one-to-one in-person lessons. It's the least scalable thing that you can do to get paid for your knowledge. Now, that being said, everybody understands it. Everybody gets the exchange of value. I show up with a $100 bill in my pocket. I get a lesson. You tell me what to do for an hour, and then what? And there's a lot of ways to change the in-person lesson. We'll get there. But let's start working down this ladder. And this is not an all-inclusive ladder, if you will, but things like coaching packages, multi-lesson commitments, if you will. That starts to give you a little bit of scale because you're getting people to come back, so you're lowering your churn. Live remote lessons. This is something that's happening, empowered by technology, using Onform, Zoom, etc. It's cool, it's useful, but again, you're stuck now. Instead of standing an hour on the lesson tee with a person, you're sitting at your computer for an hour doing a remote lesson. So it's more geographically scalable, and it's certainly something that I think coaches should put in their arsenal of products that they use to deliver their knowledge, but it's still kind of at the tip of the scale iceberg, if you will. We then get into group coaching. Now you're getting, some more scale. You're there by yourself. In 1 hour, you're helping 5, 10, 20 people and getting paid in some more than you would if you were just in a one-to-one lesson. Then moving into, I'd say, with the meat of the scale, asynchronous remote lessons. Many coaches are already doing this. Onform empowers it, and what we mean here is you're able to get swing videos from students remotely, analyze them at the level and depth that you feel like you want to provide, and send that back to the student with a guide. My suggestion is always to provide the next plan, right? Okay, here's the analysis of what you did. Now I need you to go out and practice this way and send me the tip or send me the video so that I can comment on that one. That's the next hook, like Hugh's saying. And then maybe at the bottom of the scale pyramid is online content, right? Self-serve products, bundles of drills, community forums, practice plan guides, educational material. The idea that you can start to productize your knowledge is at the bottom of that scale pyramid. It's broadly applicable. You don't have to be standing there, and you can start selling some things in your sleep. Okay, I'm talking a lot. Let's go back up the pyramid here. And Adam, you've actually written a book, which I'll reference at the bottom here, which I think is great. And the entire preface or premise of this book is how to move away from the one-to-one lesson into more subscription type packages. And you've done it. Let's start talking about how you did that and what it looks like for your coaching business.
Yeah, I think that, that Hugh and I hear all the time about coaches and how coaches want to work. It comes down a little bit to different ends of the scale. You'll have some coaches out there that are just struggling to fill their agendas, and then there needs to be a lot of marketing, communication aspects of how to build clientele, how to market yourself, etc. And then you have the other end of the scale where people are too busy doing too many hours. They've hit that ceiling, and they haven't got that life work balance, and they're bordering on exhaustion, and then you've got everything in the middle. And a lot of the ideas that I was able to implement around my business were about maximizing my income with the time that I wanted to work. So if I was doing a 50-hour week back in the day, which I'm sure we've all done, we're all stupid enough to have done at some point, where you just can't say no, and you go into time that you've blocked off for other things, and you even and it invades then in your private time, and you're starting early in the morning because someone wants a lesson before work, and then you're trying to fit people in late on a Sunday afternoon when actually you wanted to finish at lunchtime. And then sort of how do you then, because obviously you're earning quite well here. If you're doing, if you're charging $150 an hour, $100 an hour, and you're doing 50 hours a week, that's a reasonably good income. So it's not so much as to say, well, just do 35 hours a week, because suddenly you've lost a huge chunk of money. So for me, it was kind of like, well, how do I earn the same amount of money, or whatever that desired amount is, on a weekly, monthly basis, but also over 12 months, because very much in Central Europe, and I'm sure parts of the States and other countries, we're very seasonal here, especially where I live in Switzerland. Our golf season is literally 9.5 months, 10 months maximum. So if you're looking, how do I increase my income over those 12 months? Then you start to look at, well, if I'm not going to do as many hours, I need to, replace that income through other ideas, whether that be, like you suggested, whether that be increasing my hourly rate, so doing more group tuition. So I'm not earning my $100 an hour now, I'm actually earning $250 an hour because I have 6 people paying, and I'm doing more of that in a week. Whether it's selling products on top of, so if I did a putting clinic, for example, I would have many stations that I would build, and I would have training aids within those stations, and I would have affiliate marketing deals with everybody who, produced those training aids. And people would say, oh, I love this. This has really helped my putting. Where can I get one of these? And I would say, well, I'll order one for you. And then instead of them going to Amazon and buying that product, I was then getting, some money off that product, the product that they already wanted. And then, of course, if you look at golf trips and away days, and then subscription models where there's obviously less churn, like we've talked about, they're paying on a monthly basis, and you calculate your time that you are spending. So you've got your couple of hours a month, plus the review of the lesson, plus the use of a platform, plus practice plans, and a discount maybe on my group stuff, and a discount on my golf trips. And suddenly, you've turned a student whose budget was maybe $150 to $200 a month. Suddenly they're spending $300 or $400 a month with you, but they're happier than ever. So really, I just looked, that's how I went about it. I want to earn this much in a year, but I only want to work this much. How am I going to replace those hours? And what do I need? How am I going to do that? And how am I going to replace that money through other areas of my expertise? I wrote a monthly blog. I did book reviews, again, with Amazon, so I would recommend a book to my students. They would click my affiliate link to buy that book. I would get a few dollars off that book, training aids, and right up to the point where I had partnerships with luxury brands. And if somebody purchased something from them, then it became my commission became significant. For example, I had a partnership with Porsche, the car company. If I was able to bring them a new customer, I was able to get 3 or 4% commission on a new car, 3 or 4% commission on a secondhand car. They're not cheap cars. So suddenly I'm using my influence, my knowledge, and my network to help people with not only with their golf game, but also everything that surrounds the golf game. And I was getting, fortunately, a little bit here and a little bit there for all of that. So that's sort of how I approached it.
Talk, what we're talking about here is this sort of subscription plan coaching. We're certainly not the first one to bring it up. And I think it's hard to get an industry to shift. It's also hard to get clients to come with this mindset. But this asynchronous remote lessons a lot of words or fancy words for really what I think is a change fundamental business uh, program, which is, you get paid $100 an hour for a lesson. Hopefully you get a couple, get that person come back twice a month or something like that. Instead, if we start, and by we, I just mean general coaches in general, start thinking on this monthly time frame, right? Setting up maybe it's $300 or $400, coupling that with a longer term goal, right? Reduce my handicap from 10 to a 5. Prepare for the club championship. I'd like to be top 3. Create, like you said, maybe it's bundled in with a trip you're planning to Costa Rica to play golf, and you'd actually like to show up and do well instead of stumble in front of your friends. Whatever that longer term goal is, paired with a subscription type program. And here's the key, I think, which is when I present this to some coaches, they're like, gosh, that sounds great, but it seems hard, and I don't really want to have to talk to my students outside of me standing there at the lesson tee. Okay, that's fine. Take that mindset. However, if you look at a subscription sort of idea, the idea is that you're providing little micro nuggets of knowledge at various random times, and you get to choose how much time you spend on those little nuggets. And yes, we're talking about being texted or messaged at various times throughout the day from your stable of 100 clients. But you get to choose when and how quickly or how deeply you answer those questions. You can use a platform like Onform to send and receive video, to give little nuggets of knowledge and feedback. And then Adam, you just talked about a ton of other things. Getting coaches to understand that they are the influencer in their community, in their club, and to use that to bring other products, affiliate links, etc. I don't think it's always recognized at what an incredible opportunity people have when they're at a club or even at a public course. Just by virtue of being at that club, you are now the de facto most knowledgeable person on golf, and you have an opportunity to really scale that because people are coming to you for the knowledge. Hugh, you started the Coach Alliance somewhere in the need for all of this, like you said, 5 years ago. Tell us a little bit more about like how coaches are finding value with that and what you're doing with it.
Well, I mean, one of the big things that the having access to more coaches through our membership has brought us is created an opportunity to talk to coaches, both as a community, but also from an individual perspective. And as I touched on earlier, I think it's very tempting to think as a golf coach that you're the only person that's experiencing the kind of loneliness, the lack of support, the lack of mentoring, the lack of advice. Everyone who does this for a living is experiencing similar things. And I think that one of the single biggest fears, if you like, of golf coaches is that they wake up on the 1st of January and they're not guaranteed a living. And we're not all conditioned for that. We're just not all conditioned for that. And particularly, I mean, Adam's talked about this, that if you're working in Northern Europe, for example, or the United States and a lot of the northern states, you have an 8-month job or a 9-month job. And unfortunately, that 3 or 4 months where you're not actively working is generally spent thinking about how poor you're becoming and worrying about what next year looks like. Being able to spend time talking to coaches who are all experiencing the same things, exchange ideas, exchange best practice, and give them all tools to help grow higher functioning businesses. Because I've already alluded to the fact that there's very little in terms of business and marketing that's covered in our qualifications. And effectively, as teachers or coaches, we're in a position where we are effectively entrepreneurs, but we don't have any help whatsoever. And I think that's one of the reasons that Onform are doing such a good job here, is that you're not just providing the market-leading product, you're also providing the support and education to help coaches thrive. We are the single biggest stakeholders in the industry, and we if we work together, if we learn from one another, we will make more successful businesses, which in turn should make us feel a little bit better about ourselves. And I just wanted to actually, I think David's question about difference between teaching and coaching, I think that's more a language barrier than anything, David. I personally don't see a difference. I know that North America refers to them as teachers or instructors. We call them coaches or pros. It makes no odds. So I wouldn't. That's not something to be thinking about.
Well, I think another question that came in was actually about specifics. How do we build these communities? How do we do this? Tell me what to do. I'll put it out there and say my goal in today's webinar was to start the process of thinking slightly differently here and just thinking of what the challenge is. Moving away from the 1 hour lesson is not an easy thing. You can't just do it tomorrow. It's going to take educating your students. It's going to take a different mindset on your own self. It's going to take maybe rewiring how you think about going to work. Now, that being said, I think we can cover more detail throughout the year. That's why we called this a webinar series. The specific question I hear right now is like, okay, so what app or what products do we use to start doing this? And I don't think there's any one out there. And I'll be the first to say Onform can certainly help with delivering more subscription-based type coaching. We can use collections to set up the tiers. We don't take the money. We don't necessarily do the scheduling. We can support certain things. But I'm not really here to sell that at the moment. There's other products out there like Kajabi or School or Circles that are these online community tools. You guys can all go Google any of those that creators are using across a billion different industries. And there's some combination of all of that that's probably a level of effort that you would want to engage in. But more than anything, I just want people to start thinking about how to start getting paid for their knowledge instead of their time. You guys have opened up the idea that and demonstrated that it's possible. I've seen thousands of coaches in other industries do this, and they end up with a stable of people paying them on a more regular basis. No different than the subscription business of Onform. And the reason why SaaS or software as a service has become so popular, it evens out those peaks and valleys of revenue. That's true for us as a business. It's true for the coach, right? Like you said, most coaches work 8-9 months a year, often, or they might switch their locations and work 12 months a year, but they're out, getting paid for their time. So with that, I hope we've at least touched on the premise of what is going to be several webinars to come that will dive more into specifics on how to achieve each of these things. I want to leave folks, because I told everyone at the beginning we'd be around 45 minutes or so. I want to leave folks with some resources from you guys, the Coach Hub, your online community, and Adam's book, Maximizing Your Income. It's available on Amazon. Just Google it, and there's a ton of very specific details in there that would help any coach. But today's 45 minutes are up. I want to invite everybody to keep an eye on our Onform socials, because we're going to start doing these webinar series and diving more into every specific thing that we've talked about throughout the year. Adam and Hugh, you guys are incredibly knowledgeable and will help explain the realities of how to do this, because you guys have done it and you've seen from boots on the ground what it's like. Any parting thoughts right now, just to set the table for coaches? Hugh, let's start with you, that you'd like to leave people with.
Well, I think that's just maybe relating to that last question we had. I think it was from Justin Pollock, that just get all of your clients' contact details into one space, even if it's just a spreadsheet. Cell phone or mobile number, email address. If you want to keep more details like birthdays or age or handicap, absolutely fine. But it should be easy for any business effectively at the press of a button to be able to contact everyone at the same time. And there's a ton of different platforms out there. Adam and I have used MailChimp over the years, which worked very well. But just ensure that you know who your clients are, past and present, and have some means of being able to communicate with them on a monthly basis. But that's a start. It's very easy in this industry for people to forget about you. That's the way the world goes these days, unfortunately. And being in the golfer's consciousness isn't a terrible idea.
Yeah, I love it. Adam, any thoughts?
Yeah, I would just say, like, as a very first step for anyone, you're going to have advocates of your coaching. You're going to have those people who come to you. They can't get enough of what you're doing. You know, we all have them. Some people have more, some people have less. But don't be afraid to just sort of sit down with these customers and ask them what they might want. You know, like, can I put together something more intensive for you? Would you be interested in you know, you come to me regularly for lessons, you're on all my courses, you sign up for everything I do. You know, these are the people that, you know, can't get enough of you and what you're doing. And these is a good place to start, to just say, like, what about if we did something more intensive together? What about if you were to pay me monthly and I was to give you X, Y, Z? What would you think of that idea? What would be the ideal package for you moving forward, that you'd be happy with? And then you can throw that price around as well. These people are going to do everything they can to help you and support you. And I think that's a good starting place if you're not quite sure, you know, what to offer and how much to charge, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to use those amazing customers to help spread your brand, right? Like, we certainly, again, core principle of business. Also, I wanted to comment, Hugh, that's a great note. Onform will gather your students for you and use our broadcast message capability to communicate with everybody in bulk. And it's a private, you know, bulk way of doing that. There's a lot of ways. You're going to need to use all of them. There's no one thing that's going to solve this, but we're going to dive in more in detail over the coming weeks. So this whole education series is something I'm really looking forward to. With that, Adam, Hugh, thank you for joining me today. We're going to see you again. Everybody, thanks for tuning in. I hope this has provided some new ways of thinking and some thoughts for you. Stay tuned for more. Appreciate your time and have a great rest of your day.
Stay well, everyone.